Excellent film. I grew up in northern Maine and came over here for graduate school and never left. And there are a lot of comparable attractions, if you will, between Vermont and that story to a certain degree. Obviously, my work in 30 years in Vermont, I've done nothing but financial aid and a few other things along the way. But I was a first-generation college student myself. And it was a life changer. And we see that at CCV every day. I'll just tell you one short little story. We graduate about 450 students complete their degree, 400 to 500. And we use the field house at Norwich University for our commencement because it's in the central part of the state. We've got 12 centers all over the state, so it's sort of halfway for people to drive. So we have those graduates, and they bring with them 3,000 supporters, families and friends and children and grandparents who have been with them while they've been working on their associate's degree, some of them for a very long time. All walks of life, all socioeconomic statuses. We have, the refugees and immigrants who are graduating with us now, and it is the most wonderful day of the year. It makes all of our work worthwhile. I work with a lot of federal regulations, as I know you guys do too. And on those bad days, I'm like, think of commencement, think of commencement, think of commencement. We have so many stories like that to tell, so this movie I really related to.
I would say I related to it as well, just because I think my background with high school students in the last 22 years of being in Montpelier at the middle school and the high school, and I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom in Lyndonville, so I can definitely relate to some of the stories, some of the students. And I think we've all been to school with kids from different areas, and it's definitely been I thought it was a good movie. With the Mountaineers, we bring in college students from all over the country, 30 players, and we see kids from diverse backgrounds as well, even at that level. This will be our 12th season, 30 kids a year. You get to know a lot of different people from different walks of life and different communities, and it definitely can relate to this. There's a lot of the haves and the have-nots that come in both ends of the spectrum. So
I should mention too, I have an 18-year-old high school senior who looked like one of the boys, and we're big sports fans, so I'm rooting for them when I was watching it at home.
Yeah, I know. When I was watching the movie, the earlier game where they almost won, come on, just hit the shot, win, But I don't have a lot to say. I mean, I run an outpatient treatment program for young people, and there really wasn't. I mean, the stuff that came up around the substance abuse issues in the movie was pretty tangential. I mean, I know the one young man had his problems with his mother, but in small towns like that, just like I mean, this stuff is everywhere. I mean, anywhere that people are struggling or dealing with pain, drugs are always something that's around. What I thought was really nice about the movie, I like the coach, and this thing is there's a lot of we're in the news, right, because our governor came out and told the world that Vermont has a drug problem. Everywhere has a drug problem, so it's not really. But we said it, so we're a big deal. I think some of the things that they were that they're really talking about in that movie about hope and direction, and I think a lot of times we're thinking about these issues around kids using drugs. Why do kids use drugs? Why do kids do this or that? And I don't know, as much attention goes to thinking about how do we help kids have direction and hope for the future in their lives, because not having that is a very difficult thing to live with, and so I like the way that was sort of looked at in the movie.
What did you folks think?
Well, I was impressed that that basketball team, even though they kept losing, they still showed up every day.
They stuck
Right.
together, yeah.
They still all
Totally.
played, and that those guys who were in that senior class, well, all those high school boys were really a team and hung out together. That for that town and that school to support that and have the church have the open gym, so kids were playing basketball on weekends or evenings or something like that, was really important for a town that was falling apart that much. To still have something stable for those kids was amazing.
There wasn't much else going on.
Which is frustrating. I've been a mentor for 2 decades, and it's been my window into poverty in Vermont, and functional and dysfunctional families, and it's really been something. In the documentary, the little piece here, I struggle also with how it is that we recognize kids, the kinds of excellence that we recognize in kids. And here's a small community where it's basketball. And I'm thinking, there's so much besides basketball. I mean, kids have passions in a lot of different directions. And some kids have opportunity to pursue those passions and find other adults, significant adults in their lives to help them kind of nurture those passions. But in small communities like that, in small communities here in Vermont, sometimes the options are really limited. And so I was taken that the young boy who thought he wanted to be a preacher ended up going in a different direction. One of them ended up going to art school. It just seems as though it seems as
Art school.
oh, nothing at all. I just think it's interesting how in some communities, in some states, I mean, Indiana, basketball is big.
Yeah.
Basketball is big.
Yeah.
And if basketball is your thing, you have an opportunity. And even if basketball is not your thing, it may become your opportunity. But there are so many other avenues that kids need to pursue, in some cases want to pursue, and there aren't those kind of opportunities. And it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad.
To play on what you're saying, in Indiana, not only is basketball big, it is critical. They have Little League that isn't baseball, it's basketball.
Oh, really?
And they have Indiana University. I was an undergraduate at Indiana the 2 years, or the 4 years I was there, we won the NCAA twice. 3 years prior to me coming, they had won.
When Mr.
Bobby.
Bert played there, probably.
He played at Terre Haute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had Notre
State,
Dame and you
yeah.
had Purdue and
Yeah.
you had so basketball to be the very last team and to lose every single game in a state like Indiana in basketball has an even larger impact than most communities. You know, I come from an urban setting, and in an urban setting, you tend not to kick kids off teams because the teams are the kids' avenues out of poverty. And so you want to keep the kids and keep them. The only way to keep them in school is keep them in the teams. Suburbia can play that where, you know, if you screw up, you're off the team.
Right.
But I'm intrigued with, in a rural community, the devastation that it also has, like an urban area where you kick the kid off the team and he dropped out by a sophomore year.
Well, Brian, you said you liked the coach in there. And
No, I didn't say that, actually.
Oh.
Somebody, I think you
No,
said
I think
that.
You did.
yeah.
Well, in the beginning, I was
Yeah.
shaking my head
Yeah.
and cringing at some of the criticism he was giving those
Yeah.
kids, and I was worried for them. And then I did disagree that maybe they shouldn't have kicked that kid off the team. He was the one who needed that the most.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line. I mean, you kind of can see some ways sometimes being very strict is a good thing, and sometimes it's not. It's got some pros and cons, and there's kids that need the discipline and want the discipline because they don't get it anywhere else, in the house or anywhere else, and they need that fine line to really bring them into focus on a goal, but and then the other times I'm not sure that kid saw the goal anyway, so I'm not sure that was the best solution there. I don't know. But maybe a 2-game suspension instead of kicking him off the team.
Yeah.
They've sent the same message and got him back on the right track, so that's what I would have thought about
Giving
that.
him something to
A
do.
little bit to work for, yeah.
The draw of the family too in that community, how important the family is. And we see that students who may want to continue beyond high school, but the draw of staying in that small town, that small community is so important, which is why we provide a nice bridge for that. But we also say, as they said in the film, when that recruiter was there from the for-profit technical school, trying to get him to go there, that the hardest part is taking that first step, really, and that's what we find. Not just with the high school kids who perhaps weren't on a college track, but even for our older students who didn't do well in high school and are now looking to improve their skills, go back to school. They're scared to death. They didn't have a good experience in school. They think it's going to be just like high school, and it's not. And they come and they realize, and then they sail on. It's very rewarding. But that family pull, don't want you to change. Why aren't we good enough? Why do you want to be better? Those are conflicts, I think, in a lot of families. What did you think, Caitlin?
I thought it was a really good film, and we're talking about the the importance of basketball in Indiana, and I think they were talking about the consolidation earlier, and that issue too in basketball is such a big deal, and they're talking about they're losing every game. They have, it was 33, I think, boys in their whole school, versus these schools that have 300 boys to choose from for their team, and with that pressure of being in Indiana, with that just that feeling that they would still want their team, their Medora team, to keep playing every game against all those odds is very impressive and telling about the sense of community there.
Well, I mean, the thing they were talking about this in the movie is pretty much the only thing that was keeping that town going. I mean, it's the story. I mean, that's in Indiana, but you see it all over the place. I mean, there's not really an economic base there for the town. In some ways, there's not really a reason for it to exist except the people who were there. And but they're saying, if they closed that school, there'd be no center. I mean, you see that in the small towns around Vermont too.
They talk about closing their small elementary schools, and they fight tooth and nails
There's
to
nothing else there.
keep it open.
Yeah, I mean, even in a city like Montpelier, I mean, it's the enrollment's gone down, and there's been some issues with the enrollment's going down. But I still think that people take a lot of pride in that school and the fact that it gets a lot of recognition nationally. And I think if it ever did go out of Montpelier having the state capital without a high school, or without the school system consolidating with another school where they become anonymous, I think that'd be a big issue for a lot of people as well.
You see it in some of the smaller towns, like we do some work out like in Williamstown, and that's an example. I mean, it's it's basically it's kind of a rural ghetto, it's very poor out there, and the school is everything in that community. I mean, if you take that out, it's true. There's not a lot.
And they won the state
really
championship this year.
together. Well, there you go. What's nice in Vermont is that in Vermont you can find some other little schools about the same size to play against, so you're not so it's a little more competitive.
I loved seeing the fire engines.
Yeah,
Wasn't that
That
great?
looked like fun.
Taking those kids through town with the lights on. What a, I don't know, what a thrill. Like, yep, we've been doing this for years, we're still doing it.
Yeah, their perseverance was very inspirational.
Yeah.
And I think the coach, even though he's critical, he was part of the reason they kept going too. I mean, he did push the right buttons.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes a tough coach, I played for really tough coaches, and those are the best coaches. When you look back at it, you may have hated them at the time, but they got you on the right path and they got you to win, and there's something to be said for that. I mean, some of our best coaches with the Mountaineers have been tough, and the ones that weren't so tough lasted about a year and we moved on because they didn't get the respect sometimes,
Exactly,
so
yeah.
There's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of that stuff is style, whether you're strict or I mean, there's a lot of different styles for doing things, but the thing that that it's easier to see in basketball, where we took the kids the way they were playing at the beginning of the film, where they could barely dribble the ball or complete a pass. They were playing at the end, and I think, this is a lot of the things, it's easy to see visually in basketball on the screen, but it's playing out all the time, and we're trying to get kids to move from, from here to there, and it's a question of, really giving them the concrete skills that they need to deal with whatever their challenge is. In this case, it's a basketball challenge, saying basketball skills, but, that kind of thing of like, of just, practicing the things they had to do and just keep working on it, and eventually they got better. And, a lot of times, style apart, I mean, we're asking kids to take jumps and leaps without really giving them the resources and the training they need to actually do them. So, I think it's nice in a film like that, you can see that really tangibly how important that is.
So we pretty clearly see how socioeconomic status and the ability to go to college and to pursue a career is inextricably linked. What are we doing? What's CCV doing in this case, if I may?
Certainly.
To help kids who come from impoverished families to get to college and then to succeed, to stay, because that's what I understand. The most difficult is getting beyond that first year.
And keeping the young men in school.
Young men.
Young men. In higher ed, the majority of women at any of our schools are women, and the young men come and they go. They don't stick with it. And we know the stuff about whether the young men really mature until they're like 25 or 26. Their frontal cortex. But what we do is, we're in each community. We have a good financial aid program. The hardest part is getting them in there. Right now, CCV, a student who qualifies for the full Pell Grant, which is the base award for financial aid, it covers their tuition and fees along with their VSAC grant.
Oh, that's great.
So they can, they're living at home or, in an apartment, they can get their tuition and fees covered. And we help with some books for the ones who really need the help.
Fortunately, if they have taken to the habit of living indoors and eating regular, there's a problem.
What do you mean?
Living indoors and eating. Where they're going to live with nothing, and if they have no money, how are they going to eat? So they can get tuition, and that's dealt with, but for how long the program goes, how are they going to live on air?
Well, many of them work. The younger ones still live at home with their parents. They are eligible to use some student loans for living expenses as well. We try to counsel them to take as little as possible, because they're going to need that when they continue on with their bachelor's, and there's a ceiling to how much they can get for an undergraduate degree. And to be honest, a lot of our students don't have a lot of financial literacy, so they know that the loans, they're eligible for them, they're easy to get, and they don't think about the longer term consequences of needing to pay it back. So we do a lot of loan counseling, debt counseling. We have a United Way person in our Winooski Center who helps with is it 611? Do I have that right? 511. Who assists students in crisis. 211, there we go, I knew it was one of those numbers. To help them with their expenses. We have a fund too that if a student blows a tire on their car, we'll give them money to help them fix those things, because they need the transportation in our more rural centers. In Winooski, when the bus strike isn't going on, they can use the bus to get to our big Winooski Center, but in St. Johnsbury, not so much if they live out in Danville somewhere and they're coming in. So we try to help them that way. And more students, when the economy tanked in 08-09, we saw a lot of students with means who couldn't afford to go to their private out-of-state schools anymore come back and come to CCV. They're like, we got to go to the community college. And they get in there, and they're in classes with 14 students, very diverse backgrounds and ages, faculty that work in the profession that they're teaching and are passionate about it. And they're like, I was in a lecture hall of 400 people, and he didn't know if I was there or not. this guy makes me participate. So we work very hard to get them in, keep them, and also we do some, to make sure that they're in the right classes, we don't require SATs, but we do a placement exam. And if they need, and many of our students who return need help, especially in math. So we have some developmental math programs to help them get back up to speed. So we're working really hard at it. About 70% of our degree students are on financial aid at CCV. We serve about 13,000 students across the state every year, 700 here in Montpelier. So
I think it's a really good model, and you know, in some ways, I mean, the post-secondary education model now, this thing about, you know, people going away to, you know, to wherever and you know, running up these ridiculous amounts of debt. You know, I mean, it's not, you know, my daughter was living in Germany for a while. It was interesting there because there people go to school in the town where they live, and they live at home. I mean, that's what happens. You know, and it was just interesting because, you know, in a lot of ways it's a lot more practical. You don't have to. I have a kid in school now. I mean, you know, we're lucky we have some really good. He got a scholarship, whatever, but it's just unbelievable. You know, you come out of you're paying $40,000 a year for undergraduate education. Undergraduate education. Sometimes you come out and you're not even really qualified to do anything. You know, and but except have an enormous amount of debt. So I think it's going to be interesting that you know that this is a model that
right, and it's
makes
a
lot of
good
sense.
Value education.
Yeah.
So we also do, many of us bring in Montpelier and at our other centers, we'll buy the raft of Costco soup and bring it into the center and put it in the student lounge.
Oh, nice.
So thank you all
Any
for
other
coming
comments?
out.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.